As the Republican field fills out ahead of the 2024 presidential election, there's one thing they seem to have the Democrats don't: youth. Of course, the frontrunner, Donald Trump, is the major exception. Just a few years younger than the octogenarian in the White House, the Democrats' likely nominee. But while every Democratic candidate who has so far entered the race would be 70 or above by Election Day, the rest of the GOP candidates and presumptive candidates have an average age of 57. And the decades-long age gap seems to turn off a lot of voters. An NBC poll taken when President Biden announced his re-election plans says yes. 70% of voters said Biden should not run again. 69% of those cited his age as a factor. So, are the Democrats setting themselves up for a candidate who doesn't stir the base? Could it provide another pathway for Trump 2.0? To discuss, I'm joined by former Massachusetts State Senator Eric Lesser and White House aide during the Obama administration. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Captain. Quite a wind-up right there.
so let me put this in perspective.
Yeah.
If Barack Obama wore glasses and a fake mustache like Bobby Valentine and decided to run again for the presidency, he would be 61. Either between 10 and 20 years younger than any of the candidates currently running for the Democratic nomination. Is that a problem?
Well, I don't think that the age per se is the problem. The issue is are the ideas that are being put on the table actually exciting and motivating for a generation of young people? And I think the answer there for Biden is yes. Look at what he's done with student loans. Look at the historic achievement that's helping millions of people in that young millennial and Gen Z cohort. He was elected in 2020 in large measure because of unprecedented support and turnout from young people. So let's see how this plays out. As you had mentioned, the front runner on the Republican side, Donald Trump, is himself of an advanced age. So I think voters, when they look at what the candidates stand for and the ideas that are animating each of their respective campaigns, I think you're going to see a lot of excitement come out from young people. And by the way, a lot of this commentary was there in 2020, and you saw record turnout, especially record turnout among young people for the Democratic nominee.
Right. So it's empirically clear that youth turnout is higher than we would expect it to be. Right. It's noticeably higher. It's not not a sort of greatest generation high, but it's really noticeably high. But how much of that was just a function of them voting against Trump as opposed to voting for Joe Biden?
I don't think so. I think you've actually seen a trend in recent years of young people in particular moving to the Democratic Party. You mentioned the historic Obama campaign in 2008. That was for sure a watershed moment. And you've seen in every presidential election really since then, younger voters, millennials, Gen Z, moving to and supporting Democrats in higher and higher numbers. That wasn't always the case. For example, in the 1980s, a lot of young voters gravitated to the Reagan campaign. So I think it has more to do with the underlying messages, whether it's climate change, which we know is an animating issue for young voters. I mentioned and we talked about the student loan issues. Again, very, very big issue. Or the growing issues around tech and tech policy and privacy that are also of importance to young people. You see time and time again the position on climate, the record that this president has on tackling climate change, and the work around student loans and student debt, I think are going to position him very well to generate a lot of enthusiasm.
So why isn't that showing up in his numbers?
Yeah, well, I think that there is enthusiasm. He outperformed in the Democratic Party, dramatically outperformed expectations in 2022. Some of this is the natural ebb and flow of an election campaign. We're far away from people focusing on a presidential campaign right now. We've got much more urgent issues. A debt ceiling deal just panned out. Let's see where things go. I do think that as the stakes become crystallized in this election cycle, as we get closer to it being a real contest and a real choices being out in front of voters, that you're going to see more enthusiasm.
So how much of this is actually sort of the background story is actually about Kamala Harris? That Republicans think that she's not, notice that her favorability numbers are not high, and going after Biden on his age is a way of saying, well, if you're voting for Joe Biden, you're really going to get her.
I mean, I'm not going to psychoanalyze the Republican tactics. That would need somebody with far more expertise than me to look into that. But what I would say is actually I think Vice President Harris has been incredibly popular and effective at motivating parts of the Democratic base and is going to be a really important part of the strategy for success both President Biden's reelection and, of course, Vice President Harris's reelection. And I think, we'll see how this plays out. But again, people are smart, and they're going to see a choice on the ballot on climate, on the economy, on worker training, on student loans and student debt. And they're going to make a choice based on whose positions and whose policies are going to best animate and support their 30, 40-year headway that they've got where we need to see progress on these issues.
But let me push you on this a bit, Eric, because I was at the 80th birthday party for a dear friend who was very active in politics for his whole career. And he said, 60 is the new 50, and 70 is the new 60. But 80 is still 80. That's a big change. And, I got to say, I'm 44. I don't feel quite the way I did when I was 22, right? There are real changes as you hit your 7th and 8th decade. And this is not just a story about Joe Biden. Donald Trump is only 4 years younger and has expressed his belief that exercise depletes the body's energy and actually worsens your health. So there's some issues there too.
I do remember that. Yeah.
Is this not something that the American public has the right to be deeply concerned about? That we are putting extraordinary power in the hands of people whose medical status is not real? We can't be all that.
Well, to challenge that, there's been absolutely no substantiation of any question about his medical capacity. So just putting that, that should be stopped, because there's absolutely nothing to indicate, and there's been no reason to believe that that's the case. So putting that aside, obviously asking questions about people's fitness and capacity is fair. The president has said that those are fair questions. Judge it by the record. This has been the most successful period of lawmaking in Washington in a very long time. Even the debt ceiling negotiation that just passed is one of the most bipartisan votes in modern history in Washington. So there's an incredible record of accomplishment there, and voters are going to look at that and they're going to make their own decision. It's certainly obviously a matter of public record, his age. It's also a matter of public record, his schedule and his ability to accomplish, what have been pretty historic results. We are just beginning to scratch the surface, Galton, for example, on what is in the Inflation Reduction Act, for example, for clean energy and climate projects. They're just beginning to tip the surface of what that's going to open up around electric vehicle manufacturing, new solar development, reducing carbon emissions across the board. This is exciting work for young people. The student loan reforms are just beginning to take shape. So let's let the record speak for itself, and people are going to make their decision.
So I'll just say, this isn't just a story about Joe Biden. And it is a matter of public record that Dianne Feinstein not just has been absent from the Senate and just recently returned, but we have seen repeated news stories calling into question severely her ability to execute the job of senator successfully. I mean, the 50-some million people who live in California deserve 2 senators, and it's not clear that they have 2 right now. Right. Isn't that something we should be concerned about?
Of course it's something that we should be concerned about, and I do think, though, that there's a bigger issue happening here, which is that the median age of the U.S. Senate, just as an example, is at the highest level it's been, I think, ever,
yes.
or certainly in recent memory. There is, I think, a question to be asked about whether or not there is something structural about American politics now that's giving such dramatic, basically incumbency support, or however you want to describe it, that's not allowing enough churn or generational change. So it's a much broader issue. It's broader than Senator Feinstein. Again, you've seen this in the House. There was big generational changeover in the House this past year. You had the triumvirate of Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn replaced by Hakeem Jeffries and Catherine Clark and Pete Aguilar, who are decades younger than the leaders that they succeeded. So we'll see again how this plays out. But I do think it's important to ask that question, if maybe there's something structural happening in Congress and in politics more broadly that's creating that dynamic.
But if there is something structural happening, it's happening to Democrats, right? The Democratic Party leadership is noticeably really old. Republican Party leadership, with Donald Trump accepted,
first, that's a big exception.
That is a big exception.
Mitch McConnell is up there in years as well. And I would say is actually you've seen the turnover happen on the House side with Democrats. That's a big example of a new change. And they just got a very big accomplishment under their belt, which is this debt ceiling negotiation, which was a big test of everyone, frankly, on both sides of the aisle the past several weeks. So again, we'll see how it plays out. I don't think it is inherent to one party or the other, and I don't think the data supports that it's inherent to one party or the other. There are examples from both Republicans and Democrats of new, younger leaders emerging. There's examples, obviously of much older leaders. I think the bigger question is whether there's something structural about American politics right now. Is it how campaign fundraising works? Is it how media works? Is it how mobilization of bases and stakeholder politics and special interest organizing works? That's probably a conversation better suited for a political scientist.
But if there is a structural issue, let me ask, is it a problem? Right? With the president, we might say the presidency is special, right? The president controls nuclear weapons, the president has unique levels of demands. Does it matter as much? Should we be as concerned about the age of the Senate? Or
it's a good question because I think it's a little bit misleading to get focused on this idea of the age. And I think the more important question to ask in terms of whether or not it's a problem is there cycling of new ideas? Somebody can be older in age but represent a whole host of new ideas. And I mean, look at Bernie Sanders, who had unprecedented support from young people in his 2 presidential campaigns and brought a lot of new ideas to the table. So I think the question to ask, just stepping back for a second, is this structure stifling innovation of new ideas and not allowing new policies, new people who might represent new policies to rise to the surface? And that's a bigger question, and I think is the one that's worth asking.
So if you were advising a young politician, or hypothetically were a young politician thinking about rising in the party and watching this, what would you tell them?
I don't think that it's constructive to get super focused on people's age. Age is not something somebody can control. What somebody can control is the skills, the ideas that they bring to the table. And what I would kind of encourage young people entering politics to do is to work on piercing through on just saying something genuinely new. A young person could run for office saying the same things that everybody else used to say, and there's not going to be much added. So step back and think about what are you offering in the conversation that's new and that's genuine and that will help solve people's problems. And I think if you're still running up against those headwinds, then we're talking about a bigger structural issue.
Eric Lesser, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.